Okay, welcome to the Learning and Design Masterminds podcast that bridges the world of instructional design. And today we're going to talk about subject matter experts. I'm Sherry Conklin, your host, and with me we have Melissa Harbour, and we're really excited to hear about all these exceptional learning experiences that our students can learn from being out in the instructional design world. So with that, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and what does a typical day look like?
Okay, sure. Hi, everybody. I graduated from the instructional technology program 2014, I think. So I've been out in the world practicing instructional design for about 12 years now. Currently, I'm at the Aerospace Corporation. I'm the Space and Technology Programs lead for Aerospace University, which is our internal training organization. So I do a little bit of different things every single day, which is super fun. That's what I like to do. I've gotten more into the project management side of things in the last few years. Now that I've been here for a while, still dabble in doing some design and development sometimes, but mostly on the project management side. Now I do a lot of advising to the SMEs who are developing their own content. And I also work a lot with the training team, and I mentor some of our early career instructional designers and who are doing a lot of the development. So I manage our training programs. I work with SMEs and leadership and stakeholders to identify knowledge and skill gaps across the company in specific areas, and then work to develop programs to address those different gaps that we have.
That's wonderful. So I'm actually the lead faculty who designs the project management course. And
Oh, okay.
so I think this is absolutely wonderful. We have one module, on communication, but I constantly say to them, you know, um, even though we're only doing one module on communication, it spans like 80% of what you do. So that's great. And you mentioned that you spend time working with SMEs. Um, um, how did you find yourself in that niche? And then what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about working with SMEs?
Well, so let me tell you a little bit about where I work, because then you'll get an idea of who the SMEs are that I work with. So at the Aerospace Corporation, it's an FFRDC, federally funded research and development company, and we primarily work with the government as our primary customer. And so the majority of folks who work at aerospace are engineers and scientists and people who have very deep expertise in their fields. Things like um, systems design, systems engineering, satellite communication systems, astrodynamics, things like that. Things that are very technical. So I have always been a huge space nerd myself. And so that's one of the reasons why I pursued a job at aerospace. And I love learning about these things. And I think that's been the the biggest part of me being able to like get into this position and really like it and thrive here. So I originally was doing like compliance training and software training here at Aerospace, but I found opportunities to advocate for being more on the technical side of things. So I, would say I'd really like to be working with the space content and the technical systems engineering content, and I would put my name out there every single time, talk to my managers anytime something would come up, and eventually I got the position of leading the entire space and technology related training that we have for the whole company because I just kept trying to put myself in that position. So um, advocating for myself and seeing what I was interested in and finding a way to get my foot in the door and start making the connections. Um, that was how I got there. I'd like to say I'm lucky, but for this particular case, it wasn't really luck. I just tried a lot and said what I wanted out loud quite often. Um, but I loved working with the SMEs because it at aerospace, the SMEs, it kind of reminds me of an academic environment where everyone has their expertise and knows that everybody else has their expertise too, and everyone is very happy to share what they know. And one thing that surprised me about working with the SMEs here was that I didn't really have to prove myself that, I knew what I was talking about. It was kind of assumed. Everyone has their expertise, everyone knows what they're doing. And so when I would start working with someone who was an expert in satellite communications, and I would, make some recommendations about how to do this training, or that we should present things in a certain way, they took my word for it, and they're like, "Oh, you're the expert. You know this." And so that was really nice, to have that kind of given to me, that I know what I'm talking about. So, um, but one thing that I think maybe a misconception about working with SMEs is that they don't know anything about instructional design. So a lot of the SMEs that I work with have a lot of good intuition about certain instructional design practices, and people sometimes fall into that accidental instructional designer role when they start talking with colleagues or other people about what they know. So, like for example, a lot of SMEs know that when you're presenting information and you want to train people on a process, it's good to give them hands-on exercises that are as close to actually applying it in a real environment as possible, to help with that transfer. And that's something that it's logical, right, when you think about it, but they love to be validated that, they did come up with the right thing, and it's because of this theory, and it was tested here like this, and these are the principles behind it. So um, it's nice to see folks who are interested in that, and I've found that a lot of the SMEs I work with, um, they want to do things that are, I guess, validated by a scientific process. So
So when you're starting a new project and you might have been there a while, so you might have those trust and relationships, but you said you mentored new instructional designers as well. So even if it's more of when you're mentoring new instructional designer, how do you mentor them, or how would you say building that trust and established partnership with an SME? Like, what should people think about?
yeah, that's one thing that has kind of come naturally for me. I think because I'm very curious and I ask a lot of questions, and I'm genuinely trying to learn too. So I'm asking questions to hear the answer, not just to, get to a certain point. So that is what I suggest for newer instructional designers is ask questions of your SMEs and really try to understand what the answer is. I always try to restate what I know and then see if they'll, if I'm getting it and they can give me feedback on it. Um, of course, people like to correct things. So if you put something out there first and it's not exactly right, you'll at least get feedback about, what you need to change. Um, it's it's also nice if you can make the time to talk with people a little bit about, things outside of work too. Ask about their vacation, or ask about, um, I don't know, how their weekend was, or how their family is, or whatever it is. If you can build those little things, it just adds so much to the relationship. And the relationships with SMEs has been like the biggest thing about enjoying my work, for one, but also being effective. I know who to go to for if I need information about something, and it's just easier to work with folks that you have that kind of relationship with. So treat your SMEs like people, try to get to know them as much as you can, ask genuine questions. That's where I'd start.
Yeah, when I was an instructional designer with the university, I had a particularly difficult faculty that I would work with, and then I found out she loves tennis. And so even when I would just be walking down the hallway, I'd pop my head in and be like, "Hey, how was your tennis game this past weekend?" And it wasn't work related. I didn't need anything from her. She didn't need anything from me at the time, but it really started to break down those barriers of like it's just a work thing. So that's
Hmm.
great advice. I was going to ask something else off topic, but I'll probably come back I'll come to it. Um, so I'm gonna skip over one and kind of go to another, because I just said that this person was a little difficult sometimes. But how do you tell people to approach a SME who may be particularly challenging or hesitant to collaborate? And have you ever had to deal with that? What did you learn?
Oh, yes, for sure. For sure I have. For sure I have. Um, Patience is key. Patience is key. If you can't get the idea that you want across an agreement right away, it's okay to take small steps towards it. So maybe you're not doing, the whole thing. For example, I've had someone I worked with before, and they wanted to do we wanted to put together an instructor-led training, and it was a lot of content. It was going to be probably 3 full days worth of content. And I knew based on surveys that we've done that people didn't have time for that, and they couldn't get away from their, normal work, their customer-centered work to do that length of training. And so we talked through it a lot, and I was like, look, we just need to segment this. We can make it modular. And then that way we can maybe space it out a little bit more, or we can set the prerequisites so that if somebody doesn't need that first section, they could just skip right to the second one, and that'll save them some time there. We can be more targeted about who our audience is for each of these modules. So against it at first, and I was like, okay, well, let's just run it as a 3-day thing. Let's see how it goes. I was like, I'm not gonna push it. We can always offer it again another time. We'd planned to offer it a few times that year. And so I decided, okay, well, let's do this first one. We'll call it a pilot. We'll use it as a test ground and see how it goes. Validate the content and everything too. So we ran it as a pilot, and we had trouble filling it up for one. We didn't fill all of the seats in the class. And second, the feedback from the participants was, it's too long. Wish I could have skipped the first part. It would be nice if we had this like over multiple different days and, sectioned off. That hit though, getting the validation from the participants, backing up what I said. That was what we needed. So it didn't, I knew that what I was suggesting was probably, ultimately what we were going to do, but I'm not going to ruin a relationship and just, be like, hey, this is the way we're doing it. Sometimes you need to test it out, let them see, let them learn from experience, right? That's how we know people learn. So, I mean, I've had that work before, and then I've continued to work with that SME, and they take my suggestions a little bit more, seriously now, which is nice. But with others, sometimes it's one of those things where you might have to suggest it several times and just suggest it over and over and over. And then eventually they'll think maybe, oh, they'll suggest it once and maybe it's their idea now, and that's okay too. I'm okay letting things move over that way too. That's another way I've gotten past some folks' resistance to doing things in a certain way. Oh, and one other thing, I've had some resistance to doing some more innovative training techniques. So, for example, I used to bring up like gamifying things quite often, and people didn't really like it. And I found out that it wasn't because they didn't think that it would work. It just wasn't the vibe. The audience, the participants were more serious. Sometimes we will have military personnel attend our classes, and it's just not the look that they want to have. Is that the experts are playing games, which is fair. It's a perception thing. It's still an effective technique, and some of the instructors are totally fine with it. Some of the SMEs will do it, but it's just more about what is the vibe, how do they want their overall like look to be for the class. So sometimes it's something that I needed to learn too. So you've kind of got to know your audience and adjust what you're recommending based on what you can learn about them.
Okay, so it's interesting because I remembered my question, and these both kind of touch on it. We had an alumni come in and talk. Well, no, they did an internship at a pharmaceutical company, and the company had said, this is the first time we've ever had five cohorts of generations, five generational
Oh,
cohorts working. So do you find sometimes that you might have to adjust your communication style based on potentially that generational cohort or even the participants, if they're a little bit maybe boomer, they may more want that face to face and just a standard PowerPoint lecture. But if you have more of those millennials, they may want more of that gamification. Do you see that, or I know I'm going off topic?
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I think that that's fair to say, and I have a big range of folks that I work with too in terms of age and demographics and stuff. And yeah, I would say that the SMEs I work with who have been at aerospace for a long time prefer the in-person instructor-led stuff. And there's also been like that huge return to office push, and that's coming mainly from folks who have done that for their whole lives, And I also get that in terms of training. I get the older generation that wants face-to-face training, and that's it. I've run into a few folks who like they won't do online classes, and that's been a struggle. There's only one so far left, so I started transitioning all of our classes to be virtual in 2019. Luckily, right before we had to do it in 2020, but we've gotten to the point now where almost everything we do have a virtual side of it, so that's good. But yeah, the presentation style, I've seen big differences. Some of my like millennial instructors or younger instructors, they'll put memes like in their in their slides, and that's always fun, and it resonates with that age and younger, but sometimes the older folks don't get it, but that's all right. So I do see a big range. But I don't know. I think that when it comes to working together and learning together, folks do like to have those one-on-one connections, and um, having the instructor-led training, I find as a preference across all of the different demographics. I mean, we do some self-paced things too, but I don't know. I haven't seen a big difference in how engaged folks are with the online, like the e-learning stuff and the videos versus instructor-led training. I've seen that everybody prefers instructor-led training, and I'm thinking part of it is just the connection that folks can make with. I mean, the same as we do, right? Like making the connections with people is just really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so we have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to jump to like highly technical training. And are there any common mistakes that you see instructional designers make when developing highly technical training, and advice
Hmm.
that you could share, or advice that you could share with our graduate students or new instructional designers who are just beginning to work with SMEs and technical content?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's important to know you don't have to know it all. So now in my role, I do a lot of advising to the SME so they can develop their own content. And now with like the Gen AI tools that we have, SMEs can develop a lot of content on their own. It's actually pretty good. I've seen some really nice things done um, that have solid instructional design principles behind them, like multimedia stuff. Um, so I think that where I would say, to pay attention is like you don't have to know everything, right? You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details all the time, depending on, what the training is that you're developing. Um, and the other thing is just to get feedback as much as possible. Build it into your development cycles. And I know that getting feedback is one of the hardest parts of working with SMEs because the timelines. But it's so critical because you don't want to develop, something that the whole thing is off base, and you've sunk a lot of time into it. So not getting that feedback right away, like maybe just do an outline, get feedback on that. And then if you could find multiple SMEs that you can reach out to just get vibe checks along the way, that's really helpful too. um, yeah, but yeah, I'd say that feedback is probably the hardest part. I have seen folks like develop, oh, like a whole scenario that, so like doing an analogy of like maybe a specific process and turning it into an analogy about like a pizza shop or something like that. And then they developed the whole thing, they did the graphics and everything. They, ended up showing it to the SMEs, and it just, they didn't like the analogy. They didn't want to have it be a pizza shop. They didn't think that that fit right. And so it was the whole thing that they just, didn't get that initial buy-in from. And so, yeah, that's it, that feedback and that like continuous feedback as you go is super important.
Yeah, so okay, and I promise this is the last question because I know my timer just went off. So, um, when I have students working on their timelines for projects, I'm always like, okay, you can't just build in, we're going to develop the objectives and get approval, check, and then move on to the next thing. Because you're either emailing it or setting up a meeting, and then you have to wait for them to review your email, and then they have to take the time to email you back. And that could be a
Hmm.
week. Do you have you had to deal with SMEs who have not, are non-responsive, where you have to continually to pry and try to get that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's why I always have multiple projects going on, and I suggest, the instructional designers I work with too, like you need to have multiple things. You're going to have to wait for a while to get feedback about this. And I also found, I just schedule meetings. I know that some people hate having so many meetings on their calendar, but that's just how I operate. Like um, as soon as I, know that we're done with one step and we're reviewing it, I go ahead and schedule the next thing. I always have something on the calendar. It makes time for me to do it, and then I see that coming up. But then also for the SME, they have to get it done by then, right? So I just put stuff on the calendar.
No, I mean, I think that that's a great strategy for people to take and think about when they're getting that feedback, because they always seem to forget to build in those timeframes of that review process. And then I'm
Hmm.
always like, and they might come back and give you feedback. They're not just approving it. So then you still have to build in time for your revisions.
Yeah.
And then you have to get that approved. So, you know,
Yes.
people will say, oh, this training will take me 3 weeks to do. And I'm like, no, no, probably it's going to take you 3 months because of,
Yes. Yes.
okay.
That that really, yeah, that comes into play a ton. It really takes a long time to do that feedback cycle. Sometimes I do like weekly tag ups, just have them reoccurring. And then that way, if they haven't had time to review it, they just do it during that time. But then at least like we've got something, steady and we're not just dragging it out forever. It depends on the person and the project, but um, yeah, just it's hard to get consistent feedback all the time. But yeah, I've always got other things going on too. So
I'm
fill
sure.
the gaps.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate you providing all these insights and real world experiences that the students can apply, take the concepts and see you're actually applying these concepts in the real world. So
Yes, yeah, especially that project management class. That one that one was really tough for me when I went through it. And I mean, like full disclosure, I cried during, finishing my final paper for it and everything, but I use those lessons probably daily. It's important.
that's great. Again, thank you so much. And I'm just going to go ahead and conclude.
Thanks.